happens to the world we leave behind. In this episode of Life After People, it is the world beneath your feet, normally unseen and undisturbed. But journey beneath the surface, and you'll find crystal caverns, mysterious ruins, strange animals, and buried in the mud of Middle America, the treasures of the Titanic of the West. Welcome to Earth, population zero. Was a surface creature by nature. But humans engineered their domain in two directions. Up toward the skies, and also down into the earth, building complex mines, tunnels, and underground cities. And the further you descend, the stranger things get in a life after people. 1 hour after people. Above ground, Seattle's International Airport is quiet. But 20 feet underground, the arrivals and departures continue. Driven by computer, these people movers were designed to operate with no human involvement. Radio signals beamed from the master control room ensure the trains don't collide.
Trains would glide into a station, doors would open, the doors would close, the train would move on to the next stop. It's ominous and it's ironic. The only thing moving at an airport is a train.
One day after people. In the mountains 70 miles north of San Francisco, a pungent mist fills the sky. Trouble is brewing at the largest geothermal complex in the world. That's because underneath this 40 square mile complex, heat radiating from the very core of the earth turns water into superheated steam, blasting it toward the surface at a scalding 455 degrees Fahrenheit. Man constructed more than 20 power plants here, designed to capture and harness this searing natural power source.
We're producing natural steam out of the ground, drilling wells deep into the ground, several miles below our feet, collecting the steam through pipelines, piping it overland to power plants. And what you see behind me is a power plant converting steam energy into electrical power.
40% of all the geothermal power in the United States was produced here. Enough electricity to power more than 1 million homes. But with those homes now empty, this carefully balanced system is teetering on the verge of collapse. As with other types of power plants, without people to use the electricity generated here, the plant will automatically shut down. Now, superheated steam from deep inside the planet has no release. And the pressure begins to build. 2 days after people. From deep inside this Colorado mountain, humans controlled the power to destroy the world.
Cheyenne Mountain is basically a very large chunk of granite, solid granite, and a tunnel was bored through the mountain, and then various other areas within it were excavated. One of the walls has a large steel door, and behind that is basically a city built within there.
Inside this mountain, a massive complex once the home of NORAD, the North American Aerospace Aerospace Defense Command. During the Cold War, it was here that American military commanders would coordinate the nation's response to a nuclear attack. And it was built here for one reason.
Cheyenne Mountain Complex is designed specifically to be able to withstand nuclear war. In fact, a multi-megaton explosion within a mile and a half from the center of the complex.
If a nuclear weapon exploded right outside the complex's 25-ton blast doors, the buildings inside might not even move an inch. The buildings were specially constructed to make sure that if the mountain moved, they wouldn't.
Each building sits on a shock mounting, basically giant springs that isolate the buildings themselves from shock waves from the outside.
Designed to withstand a nuclear blast, now Cheyenne Mountain sits permanently at DEFCON none. And the destruction of this once secret hideout will be an inside job. 3 days after people. 275 miles south of El Paso, Texas. This mountain in Mexico's Chihuahuan Desert conceals a secret. Massive crystal caverns and a hellish environment. With the temperature here reaching nearly 130 degrees and humidity approaching 100%, humans couldn't survive here for more than 15 minutes without special chilled suits that looked like something astronauts would wear. But the environment was perfect for these giant crystals. Many more than 30 feet long and 500,000 years old. Some weigh more than 55 tons. The crystals are made of gypsum, a mineral whose low thermal conductivity makes it fire resistant, and such a good insulator that it's a key ingredient in drywall and plaster. These crystals were submerged until miners installed pumps to drain the caves. To keep the caverns clear for mining, those pumps removed 22,000 gallons of water from the cave every minute of the day. Now, with the power and the pumps failing, water is beginning to reclaim these caves. As the water rises, will these spectacular natural wonders be dissolved away? 10 days after people. Beneath the West Texas city of Lubbock, a subterranean town with a population of thousands still hums with life. And according to some scientists, the residents of this town might still be talking about humans in a life after people. These are prairie dogs, which can dig subterranean complexes as big as the state of Maryland.
Prairie dog is not a dog at all. It's a rodent of the squirrel family. So their closest relatives are ground squirrels and marmots and tree squirrels and flying squirrels.
Evidence shows they developed their own language with different words to describe different predators, including their most efficient predator, man. Barks and a bobbing motion mean watch out for a predator in this unique language. Biologists believe the North American prairie dog population topped out at around 5 billion sometime in the 18th century. But as the human population exploded on the continent, man mastered many techniques to cull a prairie dog colony, from the slow, silent death of filling a burrow with toxic gas to the quick brutality of a long-range kill shot. By the year 2000, the prairie dog had lost 98% of its former population.
dogs after people in urban settings like this will no longer have to worry about shooting. So when they wake up in the morning, they're not going to have to wonder whether somebody's behind that pickup truck trying to pick them off. They also won't have to worry about poisoning.
No more bullets, no more gas. With its most deadly predator gone, just how big will this colony get? One month after people. In the tunnels below Seattle's International Airport, a transportation system designed specifically to work without the presence of man has broken down.
The last of the emergency lights loses its power. The last battery gives out, and the semi-darkened, ominous passenger corridors become totally dark.
The driverless trains sit powerless, except for one thing. Emergency battery backups, which keep the public address system working.
Door here for South Main Terminal, S, A, and B gates.
Trains to oblivion, serving no one in a life after people. Off the coast of Grenada in the West Indies, 20 feet underwater, rests a circle of concrete and steel children. Are these totems from an ancient civilization, or something stranger? And what secret will allow these images of man to come to life? 1 month after people. A Hollywood landmark hides a secret in its depths.
The Capitol Records building is an icon. It was really the first round office building built anywhere in the world. There's always been a feeling among most of the people in Los Angeles that the building was built by a record company and it looks like a stack of records. But the original press releases for the opening of the building and the documents that were produced for the tour guides show that that's not true. It was just a happy accident.
In addition to 3 ground floor recording studios, the Capitol Records building was also home to a buried treasure. 30 feet under the building exists one of the world's most acoustically perfect echo chambers. The chambers feature 10-inch thick concrete walls and ceilings made of concrete a foot thick, isolating them from outside noises and vibrations. The trapezoidal shape of the room is capable of creating an echo that lasts for up to 5 seconds. Designed by electric guitar pioneer Les Paul, it was used to provide a finishing touch on recordings by superstars such as Frank Sinatra and Nat King Cole. 1 month after people, these legendary chambers sit quiet. They won't stay that way. 1 year after people. Beneath the Mexican desert, the Naica crystal caves are now flooded with steamy, mineral-rich water. Water is the natural enemy of some crystals, such as salt. But here, along with heat and a mineral called anhydrite, water is required for these 55-ton crystals to grow.
If after people the pumps were to die out, you were no longer pumping water, then those mines would fill up again, and if you could get back to the same mineral concentrations and the same temperatures and hold them just perfectly there, that they would continue to grow those crystals. They could become 30 meters large.
That's almost 100 feet long. This will soon be a sight like no other ever seen in the world. the island of Grenada, bizarre images of mankind stare out from the ocean floor into the endless sea. A concrete man sits at a sunken typewriter, never pressing a key. A bicyclist never moves a muscle. But what appears to be a traditional still life is anything but lifeless. The artist, Jason Taylor, designed them so that their lives are only now beginning.
The underwater sculpture gardens were designed, in fact, to be habitats for future coral reefs. And so they were made from materials that coral will likely stick to.
In the time of humans, statues from ancient Greek and Roman civilizations were often discovered at the bottom of the ocean. Those statues were marble, a mineral soft enough to sculpt, but durable enough to survive centuries underwater. Clean them off, and they sparkled like new. Here, the artist chose to use concrete made of cement, sand, microsilica, and fiberglass. Elements which provide a perfect bonding surface for the liquid limestone skeleton being excreted by the coral as it grows. Millions of tiny sea creatures are slowly changing these once human shapes forever.
There are thousands and thousands of coral that attach all over it, and very rapidly, actually, only within a few years, some of these statues are already covered. It's very interesting to look at these underwater sculpture gardens already, because they really are sort of living a life after people. And only in a matter of a few years, a lot of the sculptures already are beginning to no longer resemble what they originally looked like.
Years after people. Deep inside the Cheyenne Mountain complex, the buildings that once housed NORAD headquarters remain strong. It was here that 12 million lines of computer code, written in 27 different programming languages, helped the military determine if it was missiles or a flock of geese coming over the horizon. With the external threat of nuclear warfare eliminated, the attention now falls upon an internal invader: water. The complex conceals a 4.5 million gallon reservoir built by the military to help stabilize the internal temperature.
This is water for drinking and also water to cool the massive amounts of electrical equipment that are there waiting to be used in case of an attack against North America.
Now, the more than 1,300 springs which provide protection for the buildings are under assault. The water from that reservoir is leaking out as a lack of maintenance begins to take its toll. If the springs fail, it could spell the end for some of America's most secure buildings.
So then whatever happens to the granite is going to start happening to the structure. Say if there's a landslide or an earthquake or some sort of motion to the mountain, then this motion will get translated into the structure and will cause the structure to fail because of that.
A place designed to survive a nuclear blast finds its structural integrity slowly dripping away. Five years after people. Into the very heart of one of America's most eerie and beautiful national parks drips a steady rain of antifreeze. It was here at Carlsbad Caverns, New Mexico, that naturally occurring sulfuric acid seeped into the limestone, carving out some of the largest caves in North America. In the time of humans, the caverns drew 350,000 tourists a year. Tourists who arrived by bus and by car.
We have 3 very large parking lots that we've built right on top of the cave. And if you think about it, if you have an older car sitting on your driveway, you get those little spots of oil and antifreeze and other fluids on that pavement. Now multiply that times 350,000 visitors a year.
750 feet of limestone separates the parking lot from the caverns below. But even in the time of humans, runoff from cars found its way through the cracks. Scientists estimated more than 1 million gallons of contaminated water seeped into the caves every year. 5 years after people, the flow continues.
After people, if the parking lot was completely full, you would now start seeing a very long-term, steady source of contaminants above the cave. If we end up with a lightning strike, you could actually end up setting those things on fire and then releasing all of the melted plastics and all the chemicals associated with that also down into the cave. So you'd probably still be looking at decades before the vehicles were deteriorated enough to no longer be supplying contaminants into the underground. And then you're looking at probably 50, 100 years before all of that stuff is flushed out of the rock above the cave.
The influence of man will continue to be felt here for a very, very long time. But will that be enough to stop one animal from reclaiming its former home? 6 years after people, large numbers of deer gather on the site of the Geysers geothermal field in Northern California. They are drawn here by the heat radiating from the 80 miles of steam pipes left behind by man. Although the massive cooling towers and power plants shut down long ago, 40,000 pounds of steam per hour continues to fill the pipes. Now, the deer are in for an unpleasant surprise.
Over time, with no one to do maintenance on the pipelines, we'd start having corrosion leaks. We would start having steam vents, and they would grow bigger and bigger and louder and louder. It's very much like listening to a jet engine, and that would go on probably for many years.
Years of pressure buildup finally come to a head. Deep within the Earth's core, water hits magma, and from that collision comes the crushing power of superheated steam. The corroding pipes can no longer handle the pressure. In A Life After People, the underworld is undergoing many changes. But some underground places have actually survived by drowning. How do we know this? There's one haunting place in America where it's already happened. "40 years after people, rusting remnants of human civilization continue to decay underground. But some places have escaped the depths of destruction ravaging the below-ground world. For decades, man pulled millions of dollars worth of minerals out of the ground here at the Bonne Terre Mine near St. Louis, Missouri. Lead from the mine was used in car batteries, house paint, and to make bullets. Ammunition that was used from World War I through Vietnam.
The Bonne Terre Mine, they began surface mining here in 1860. So that diamond drill was actually developed here. And then steam-driven drill was too. Many mining tools that are used today were originally developed here at Bonne Terre Mine.
In the 1960s, Bonne Terre was declared mined out and abandoned. When the mining pumps shut off, the natural groundwater began to rise, creating dual underground worlds.
When you come in here, you've just entered another world. You haven't just come into a place that isn't exactly what you expected, because it's much larger than you expected. You've entered into a completely different world where you've lost your senses.
Huge pillars reach to a ceiling that's 300 feet above the mine floor. But to reach that floor requires an oxygen tank. Because today, much of the Bonne Terre Mine is preserved underwater.
One of the things that fascinates me is how time has really come to a halt. So much of the biological world, the things that we know are going on, are driven by oxygen, and oxygen is the high-octane fuel by which things decay, by which things break down. And here in this environment, where the water has come in and flooded this, it's pushed the oxygen out of the mine, and now basically the processes are still going on, but they're going on in slow motion. It's life in the slow lane.
Concealed in the depths of this billion-gallon lake is a mining town frozen in time.
You're diving a time capsule. It's like Superman soaring in the past, because when you're diving in the mine, you're in crystal clear water, and it's one of the very few places you can get the feeling that the diver is actually soaring through the water.
Once, this staircase clattered with the boots of workers headed down into the mines. Shovels, jackhammers, and drills remain where they were left on the day the mine shut down.
They just left a drill right in the side of the mine. It's just sticking out there, hanging in by the bit. Over a period of the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, it will begin to corrode more and finally just pull away from the wall and collapse and sit down on the bottom, where it'll continue to rust away.
Even the locomotive used to shuttle lead ore to the surface remains as a ghostly reminder of the decades of back-breaking labor carried out on this spot.
Just below us is one of the mini tipples that we find in this mine. That's the place where the ore car comes to a stop and dumps its ore out. And of course, that's made out of some low-grade steel, and that's now serving as an energy source for whatever the biotic community is that's living on that iron. And over a period of time, they'll use all the nutrients out of that and turn that iron into iron oxide, into rust, and it'll be gone at that point.
All the things that supported this operation were down underground. They built these engineering offices against the back of these pillars. They put doors and windows in them, and they even put air conditioners in them to control the humidity. So you had a basic office building literally several hundred feet underground, which is now over 100 feet underwater.
When it was time for a break, miners didn't head for the surface. Instead, they stayed below, visiting a drinking fountain that's now overflowing. A locker room, once home to the chatter and clatter of miners hoping to survive just one more day, now deathly still. So why was this mine abandoned? Everything was left behind here in the name of progress.
There was no need to harvest any of that equipment. What was the use? Pickaxe. They didn't use pickaxes anymore. They didn't use the shovels anymore. Modern mines all have loaders, and the last thing a miner probably wants to do is steal a shovel from the mine, because that just means he's going to have to do more digging when he gets home. So, what's the use?
The Bonne Terre Mine is filled with examples of how different environments can lead to vastly different decay rates.
Here we see what the action of the fast lane's like. This is a railroad tie. It's rotting. It's got a biotic community which is living in there, which is turning it into just this powder. It's all because it's feeding on oxygen. It's using the oxygen as the oxidizer here, as opposed to the stuff underwater, which hasn't got access to that. This will be gone completely in a few more years, whereas the stuff underwater still doesn't look like it's even been touched. It's quite a difference.
Today, the Bonne Terre Mine is used as a scuba resort. divers from all over the world come to witness firsthand the processes that will have a big impact on life after people.
We'll see small pieces of iron actually flaking off, and that process is just happening so much more slowly than it would be happening out in the real world, where big hunks of iron are rusting away and falling off, and here it's just little flakes over a long time.
Man excavated the Bonne Terre Mine, a punctured hole in the earth. In a life after people, it will remain as a watery time capsule. Elsewhere, artifacts from a sunken ship are recovered, not from the ocean, but from a farmer's field. How did the Titanic of the West end up buried in mud for 150 years? 50 years after people. In the underground world, people may be gone, but their impact is still being felt. Studies in the time of humans showed it would take at least 50 years for the last drops of oil and antifreeze to make its way through the 750 feet of rock above Carlsbad Caverns. Now, the cavern is beginning to return to its natural state. And that state is filled to the brim with bat droppings.
In a life after people, the bat population in Carlsbad Cavern will probably start to increase, mainly because we start reducing the amount of stress on them. The bats go out, fly around, primarily the Pecos River, eat tons and tons of bugs. And they bring all that back into the cave. As they're hanging there, they're doing their business and they're dropping guano down on the cave floors. And that guano pile is an extremely rich system of organics.
The organic material proves to be a fertile spawning ground for millions of insects, millipedes, centipedes, and cockroaches.
It's sort of like a scene out of Indiana Jones. It's kind of creepy. You definitely want to keep your pant legs duct taped up so that you don't end up with creepy crawlies going up your legs, because there's nothing more disconcerting than trying to scream with a respirator on. After people, eventually they're going to fill up their usable space with guano. There's sort of no natural system that flushes the guano out, so it just gets deeper and deeper. We know that at one point, the guano pile in the Bat Cave section of Carlsbad Cavern was more than 60 feet deep.
As these creatures start to reclaim territory they've long avoided, Carlsbad Caverns is slowly becoming a giant guano-filled bat cave. 150 years after people. Some items from the time of man remain perfectly preserved. In fact, there's a place in Middle America where it's already happened. In 1856, the steamboat Arabia was transporting settlers and cargo along the Missouri River to the western frontier. Near Kansas City, the ship hit a partially submerged tree, ripping open her hull. The Arabia sank. All the passengers survived, but 200 tons of cargo went down with the ship. In the century after the sinking, rapid cycles of flooding and erosion changed the course of the Missouri River. The change was so great, the Arabia ended up buried a half-mile from the banks, entombed and forgotten beneath a farmer's field. In the late 1980s, treasure hunter David Hawley led a team of explorers to recover the Arabia. What they found was astonishing. A portal to a perfectly preserved slice of life, circa 1856.
When we reached it in the fall of 1988, we found and uncovered barrels still filled with butter, still smell like butter, barrels of molasses that were still sweet. They were shipping jars and cases of pickles to the frontier. In those clear glass jars, the pickles inside were just brilliantly green. You can still eat them. Pie fillings You could still eat those if you wished, and even the iron. You could open up pocket knives and the locks. You could unlock them still after all those years in the water.
For these objects and countless others, there were three secrets to survival. No exposure to sunlight, a constant temperature, and a lack of oxygen.
And it was all because of the lack of air. There was no oxygen at 45 feet. And while you take that same item and put it on the surface of the ground, it would rust away within a matter of years.
While the water and mud preserved many items, others were destroyed by it.
Not every piece on the Arabia had survived. The water was an enemy to some things. Cotton, for example, dissolved, while the wools did not. The cotton was a plant material, while the wool, the silk, and the beaver hair, coming from an animal of some sort, survived the water.
For the objects that did survive, the recovery effort was a race against time.
The Arabia was excavated in the winter, November to February. It took 4 months to dig it. 200 tons were recovered in that short amount of time. Sometimes people say, why so quickly? When you open up the collection to the oxygen, it begins to decay very quickly. And it's a ticking time bomb to get that stuff out of the ground, out of the mud, and out of the air into some stable environment.
To stabilize some of the artifacts, Hawley and his team had to freeze them.
We found a lot of rolling pins one day. We brought them out, and typically, like we always did, we washed the mud and we froze them. But one rolling pin somehow rolled off into the shadows, and we didn't see it. We found it, though, 3 days later. And what had once been a round, perfectly preserved rolling pin had shrunk in half of its height. Long cracks along the side, one handle had fallen off. And at this point, it cannot be restored.
The steamboat Arabia may not have reached her destination. But today, 200 tons of history, recovered from the depths, provides a glimpse at what could await some of our artifacts in a life after people. Elsewhere underground, millions of prairie dogs work furiously to reclaim their former territory. But now a new predator emerges. Which animal will survive? 175 years after people. In the heart of Hollywood, the Capitol Records building has gone green. Below ground, the famed echo chambers are now a sonic time capsule.
In the entire city of Los Angeles, one of the things we can say with some certainty is that those echo chambers are going to be among the longest lived objects left by humankind. They may very well be there 5,000 years after people, 10,000 years after people.
To ensure a consistent sound which could be easily manipulated, the chambers were constructed from concrete. And unlike most modern concrete structures, the echo chambers were built without reinforcing rods.
Like the ancient Romans, who built without reinforcing rods, the echo chamber concrete is basically pure concrete.
Even after the building above collapses, with no iron skeleton to rust and destroy the concrete from within, this sonic temple may stand for a very long time. 500 years after people. The Texas countryside pulsates with prairie dogs. With their number one predator, man, no longer a factor, the prairie dog has made a comeback, returning to population levels not seen since the late 18th century.
One colony in Texas extended in one direction 250 miles, and that single colony, by geologists estimate contain 400 million prairie dogs. That is a lot of Bowsers.
The sounds of prairie dogs barking, the yips and yaps of greeting and territorial fights, shatter the quiet of the Texas air. But an old sound has returned, barks of dire warning. That's because a new predator has emerged. The prairie dog population explosion has been good news for what was once one of the rarest mammals in North America, the black-footed ferret. The black-footed ferret feeds primarily on prairie dogs, 100 a year to feed an adult male, 250 a year to feed a family of 4. In the time of humans, this cousin of the weasel was on the endangered species list. Now, after people, the ferret will be first in line at an all-you-can-eat prairie dog buffet. 1,000 years after people, they used to be sculptures. Now they are not. Completely covered in undersea growth, the underwater statues look indistinguishable from a vibrant and colorful coral reef. Fish and other marine creatures dart in and around their new reef. Most of the evidence that this home originated as a piece of art is lost forever, just as the artist intended. 2,000 years after people. The military buildings that once housed NORAD's command center at Cheyenne Mountain are still standing.
The building structure will have corroded quite a bit. The framework of the desks and the flat panel computer screens and computers that are there will be covered in powder, rusted from the structure, but will really still be recognizable. It is an enduring tomb for human technology and for human ingenuity.
Built to withstand a nuclear blast, the Cheyenne Mountain complex survives, even as it is now entombed forever. Works of art come to life. Animals running wild. Explosive forces from the deep, shattering the calm of the above-ground world. In a life after people, it's only a matter of time before the underground world reaches new depths of destruction. On the season finale of Life After People, the leaders of man are gone. What will happen to their seats of power and their tombs? How will America's first dog survive? And this abandoned place was the launching point for the deadliest weapon in history.